Welcome everyone to the GTACC 2021, The Future is Now Tech Talks. My name is Nigel Weiser. I'll be your facilitator today for about the next 50 minutes as I take us through what I'm anticipating to be a really interesting conversation with some amazing industry leaders. What we're going to be talking about today is, as the title alludes, the future of contact centers. Where are we going? Where is the industry pivoting to? And we're going to try and touch on 4 key themes around workplace and workforce, onboarding, data and analytics, and technology. And we'll kind of just see how the conversation flows from there. And as mentioned, my name is Nigel Weiser. I've been on the GTACC board for actually 10 years now. And I work in CI Financial as a Director of Service Enablement, and really excited to be here to share. What I'd like to do before we get into the actual discussion of the panel is I'd like to do a quick introduction with our panelists, and I'll start with you, Shai.
Great, thanks. It's wonderful to be here, Nigel. Thanks for organizing the panel. My name is Shai. I am from Fonolo, and Fonolo is the leader in callback solutions. So we help call centers replace hold time with a callback, which is a great thing to do for your callers, and also a great thing to do for your call center in terms of making it run more smoothly and efficiently. And I think that's going to connect with a lot of our topics today.
Absolutely. I think you're going to have a lot of relevant information to share, and especially from what your company does, Shai. Thank you for being here. Next, I'll move to Fernando.
Thank you, Nigel. I'm thrilled to be here today, and good morning, everyone. So, Fernando Gia, I'm the Global Vice President of Artificial Intelligence, Specialized Sales at TalkDesk. So at TalkDesk, our mission is to reimagine the customer experience. If you think about calling contact center, this is something that most people dread, right? They don't know who you are, you get transferred, the organization doesn't follow, the company doesn't remember. So our mission is to solve that. And we do that by removing friction and using an AI-powered cloud-native contact center platform to deliver more personalized and empathetic experience to customers.
Amazing. I know a lot of the folks tuning in today have worked with TalkDesk before, so I'm sure they're interested to hear some of your perspectives, and especially being a role focused on AI, I'm really interested to hear what you have to share today, sir. Thank you for being here. I'll now move on to Stephanie.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Martin, and I'm a Senior Account Executive at Lessonly. We build a lightweight, modern training platform for customer-facing teams. So if you think of sales teams and customer support teams, those are our biggest customers. And one of our key taglines is that if you can write an email, you can build a lesson. And so in short, we want to empower subject matter experts to be able to build the right content for frontline teams. And so that way they can consume and digest it in the moment of need, and also help scale and onboard their teams as well.
Amazing. I've also worked with Lessonly, and I'm really excited what you're here to share, Steph.
Yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And last and certainly not least, Grafton.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Look, very excited to be here. My name is Grafton Potter. I'm the SVP of Sales and Alliances at PCI Pal. If you're not familiar with PCI Pal, and we are a secure payments gathering organization for contact centers. So as we know, whether it's work from home, in the office, PCI is a challenge anytime you're dealing with a contact center because of the exposure, risk of fraud, et cetera. So what PCI Pal does is we leverage a secure connection so that either over the phone or via IVR or even via a link, that interaction can be sent to a customer or live with the agent, where the customer can simply just key in their credit card number right there on their phone, smartphone, business phone, home phone, whatever that is. They key in that number and our system takes that in securely. So there's no exposure to the agent, to the infrastructure, and therefore making it PCI compliant. So again, very excited to be here today to talk through the future of the contact center.
Amazing. And as I think you're well aware, sir, security is only becoming more prevalent as we progress into this digital age. So really excited to hear your perspective as well. And for our panelists, I think, for our attendees, I would just call out the fact how we have a wide range of perspectives here today, which I think is going to really add some color and value to the conversation. But without further ado, let's get into it, guys. I wanted to start with just getting some perspective on, the pandemic's hit. That's been talked about in I think every single conference that you've attended or been a part of. And thinking of the future of the workplace, what do contact centers look like in 3 to 5 years, especially as you consider how work from home has come into play? What do you guys think?
Who wants to start?
I'll start off, folks. So it's been amazing in a positive way, right? So if you think about kind of the bright side of COVID, the world really became digital overnight, right? So think about it, like overnight, we had to reimagine how we engage with customers and send our staff to work from home. And I think that created a new normal for us. I think that this is overused, but in the literal sense, I think we've created we've raised the bar in many ways. I think productivity increased. I think that we had to use different ways of communicating with customers through digital channels and mobile engagement. And that has also put some stress on the workforce, right? Not only from a personal standpoint, but also the skills that are required. So think about contact centers historically been measured by efficiency and productivity with metrics such as average handle time and first call resolution. And during COVID, arguably one of the most important things that the agents had to express was empathy. So, and I think that this has created new opportunities. So I see this as a new era for us. Welcome to the future, basically, right? We're in the future right now. And I expect that those trends of working from home and reimagining the workforce and the skill sets will continue. And there's tremendous opportunity.
I think you raise a really good point. How quickly, I think just touching on the speed of how fast we had to turn, have you guys felt that impact with your clients on sort of that injection of digital into their day-to-day because of the pandemic and work from home?
Well, I'll just add on to Fernando's answer. I would say the pandemic and its various crises spawned from it showed call centers in a positive light, but also revealed some of the weaknesses in the industry. So on the positive side, there were a lot of really great stories about companies like TalkDesk, but others as well, setting up call centers very quickly, adapting to a crisis and setting up additional capacity or moving agents home when, on short notice. So in that sense, there were a lot of stories of that we can be proud of. And a lot of companies, a lot of vendors in the space really stepped up and went above and beyond. On the other hand, many call centers were also really overwhelmed with volume, especially the beginning. And so you also saw a huge pile of headlines talking about 10-hour wait times, 8-hour wait times. Callers can't reach through, callers can't get their unemployment insurance, callers can't reach hospitals. Airlines, people wait on hold all day to figure out what's going on with their flights. So it also revealed that we weren't really prepared for what happens when you have extreme increase in demand. And I think this is a lesson that is going to take some time for the industry to absorb. That in the past, we've designed call centers and we've thought about, okay, here's our expected capacity, our expected demand, and we'll design for maybe 20% over demand, maybe 50%. But no one ever says, what should a call center do when you've got 10x demand, which is what happened. And so I think that is something that we're going to have to work on as an industry to be prepared for the next time we have a situation like this. Absolutely.
So I think you're absolutely correct in the anticipation for more extreme events than maybe we've thought through in the past. Sort of focusing on just maybe even the physical space of the contact center. Do you guys see any changes coming as a result of this? I know we've started to talk about how with a larger workforce at home, potentially, we're going to reformat the way that we even configure our office, the way that we intend to use our office. So I'm interested to hear any perspectives on that in terms of just ways that you might see the location itself changing. And like I say, the impact of work from home may come into that.
Yeah, I might take that first bit. So I think what's interesting is that we've proven that work from home can work. It doesn't necessarily mean it's worked amazingly, but it certainly has adapted and adopted over this last year, where And yeah, I've had some conversations with some BPO organizations that have kind of coined this term of Agent 2.0, which is they were thinking about, okay, how do we get agents to be remote? Because it increases the span of their hiring pool that they can go for. It doesn't have to be locally, right? It can be anywhere in the world, theoretically. But this Agent 2.0, but then they still, at least, from our perspective, they said, well, how do we solve for the fact that we don't see them, right? We don't have a camera in the call center or other things, right? Access, security. And so this notion of 2.0 has come where organizations may be leveraging the camera that we're using today as part of that, seeing the agent. And again, tools like PCI PAL, for secure payments where there's not a chance to write down a credit card number, for example. During COVID, it was amazing the amount of volume that we were getting just from how do we take secure payments, right? To your point, Shai, earlier, they hadn't really thought about it, right? Then thought about what the scale means to 10x. So I think that's really where you're going to see and I don't think we're done yet, for sure. I think that's still an evolution as possibly the skill set, even of the contact center agent, begins to be more broad because they're going to be required to multitask even more, but yet also have a greater span of responsibility within the contact center as well.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of touch on two pieces there. There's the enabling the agent. There's also just the recruitment component. Wondering your thoughts on just the labor market in general, because I've heard in terms of talking with peers in the industry that it's gotten a lot harder to recruit. I'm wondering if you're hearing from your clients if they're struggling just to get people in the door, or the right type of people.
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead. Was that you, Shai?
Yeah, but you start. I'll add on afterwards.
I think generally speaking, we know it's a problem overall across the industry, not only in the contact center. I think just frontline labor, and then obviously other industries and other areas. And so to the point of recruitment, I think that's where organizations are realizing that they have to become more and more flexible around recruitment and geographically where they're recruiting. And even if there is that boundary anymore, going back to the physical space. And I think that to the theme of opportunities has also presented a lot more opportunities for them, where traditionally, because you were coming into a hub or a space, your candidate pool was very limited to a specific radius. But now, or a series of different hubs that you might operate out of. But now this remote environment has enabled, I think, across industries to be able to recruit, far, get a more diverse skill set. And, even, hearing from some prospective clients, the ability to now close some gaps, for example, maybe language barriers where maybe that geographic area didn't have bilingual staff, et cetera. So lots of different opportunities. I think there's some challenges, but definitely also opportunities from the perspective of it's widened the candidate pool.
Certainly. It's a paradigm shift. Any thoughts to add to that, Shai?
We are certainly experiencing a broad-based labor shortage throughout the US and Canada. And you can already see data in terms of restaurant workers, in terms of childcare, in terms of other labor. And I've started to see articles about call center shortages and wages going up in response to that. So this is definitely a phenomenon, and it's already we're seeing it's already documented. This is no longer an anecdotal thing, and that really drives a lot of decision making in the call center, because agent costs are the biggest factor in running a call center. So when agent costs go up, there's a lot of second order effects there. It means it justifies more spending, for example, in terms of employee retention. It may justify some technology projects that may not have been justified when wages were lower. I mean, so for example, the product we sell, which helps to alleviate long hold times, another way to tackle that problem is just hire more bodies, right? The hold times are too long, just throw more labor at it. Well, if labor costs are high, alternatives that may not have been economical become economical. So there's just a lot of decision making in the call center that's downstream from labor cost. And I think it's a really fascinating thing to watch.
Absolutely. And to your point, and I guess, as I said, the paradigm shift as the environment changes around us, it gets us to rethink. Because to your point, if the technology prior was a little bit too expensive compared to what the body and the seat might have cost, we might have gone body, where now I think it's going to force people to think a bit more creatively, expand sort of their technological horizons on where we think we can add value or automate potentially. And I think to Steph, your point just around the recruitment aspect, I know we've certainly felt that at CI, where exactly to your point, we've expanded nationally. We're trying to open up our candidate pool. We're even targeting different types of people, A, because there's an opportunity, but B, because of the shortage. And I think that it's certainly going to push us to be more competitive in the market. And I expect that the market's going to continue to be that way as everyone's hungry to bring in the best talent to drive their business forward.
If I may add, because I think,
yeah.
Chai brought up a really good point. And at the end of the day, there's power in perspective, right? And Chai mentioned kind of the number one cost in a contact center is people. In fact, I mean, if you look at any organization, it could be anywhere between 70 to 80% of the operational cost. So talk about recruitment, not just as an opportunity, but the challenges that exist today, the shortage that Chai mentioned, and so did Stephanie, but the engagement, right? I think the attrition, there's high attrition in many cases. As you think about the cost of onboarding and training a new agent, on average, and I've seen research that shows us it takes from 4 to 8 weeks to train a new contact center agent. So put this in perspective once again. You have 1,000 agents. That's anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 weeks of people time to train, and the cost involved. And then the engagement, right? I mean, most of the employees, at least in the United States and globally, according to research, they're disengaged. So they come to work to take a paycheck. So you see, take a look at customer experience issues. A lot of them are rooted in the employee experience. So I see that those are some of the challenges that we're seeing. Some of them are not new, right? The shortage and of course the attrition, they are significant right now. But I think there's ways that we can turn this around and look at how we turn them into opportunities. And I know that this is probably a segue to some of the next topics.
Absolutely. No, it's like I think any particular situation you find yourself in life with a challenge, there's always a great opportunity or silver lining. It's just about how do you reframe the equation. But I think let's start with, because it'll be easy to get away from the people. I want to stay rooted in the people just a little bit longer, and then I think we'll pivot right into the technology. So for those situations where we have to have people in, maybe the technology is not quite there, we don't have the integrations, what have you, it's a challenge to bring people up to speed, especially when you're paying for, say, 8 weeks worth of training, even before you get productivity out of them. So wondering, what would you guys see as some of the biggest challenges today and going forward in onboarding agents? And maybe I'll start with you, Stephanie, just coming from your space in Lessonly. I'd love to hear your perspective, and we can build from that.
I think from what I've seen common themes, and from an onboarding perspective, it's, to Fernando's point, starting from the beginnings, at the beginning of that employee experience and getting it right the first time, I think often is taken for granted. And so that's definitely a challenge. I think the other component is the ability to empower reps very quickly in a short amount of time. So that way they can feel like they're contributing, they can also feel engaged, and they can start to build that confidence where, you may no longer do a 4 to 6 week onboarding program. You might cut it off at 2 and then, give them, for lack of a better term, certification in one area of your business so they can hit the ground running and start to feel success. And then you migrate over time and add other aspects to their role that they need to continue to learn. So I think it's kind of rethinking about the way that you have to do it. You don't have to have a full-blown curriculum to start. You can have a series of things and then integrate it slowly. As you build up that confidence, you build up their engagement, you see success, you iterate and get feedback. So I think those kinds of basic principles that we see, in projects, in day-to-day business now need to apply when it comes to training. I think that's probably a big thing that I'm hearing a lot and that I'm seeing a lot, and that folks have more appetite to. And then really thinking about keeping up with the speed of business and change. So no longer can you take people off the phones or get into a classroom or a team huddle and physically get updated on things. And so reimagining how that looks and reimagining how that's communicated or trained across teams, because traditionally that might be something that is put together in a very fancy, high fidelity piece that is, launched in 3 weeks. You no longer have the luxury of 3 weeks. You have 10,000 people waiting in your queue. How are you going to effectively communicate to your front lines in a succinct and very effective way, but also know and understand that they're engaged with it and you can measure that? So those are kind of the key things that I'm hearing and seeing. If I were to distill it down to kind of 3 areas, which I've actually talked about a lot, which is really the ability to evolve how we're thinking about it, enable employees to do it, and then also make them feel empowered.
And I don't know if it's, I don't know where I'm drawing this from, but I'm picking up elements almost of gamification there, where it's sort of quick test, quick throw yourself in, a bit of reward back. And I wonder if there's maybe, I guess, adhering to the generational cohorts that we're now serving as well. But wondering how you guys feel about that from either how do we enable employees, whether it be in the people and the leadership and the training or technology, ways that we can get people up to speed faster. Have you guys seen anything in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm passionate about this, and so this is one of the kind of the 3 biggest areas of opportunity we see. We call this, and Stephanie touched on this, like empowering the agent. I think for too long we've relied on what's in between the people's headsets, right? And if you take a look at the agent, human, and what it takes to train on board, human agents used to do one thing 1 million times. Right, in the past. Now they're doing 1 million things at the same time. So if you think about the role of digital and digital first engagement, customer experience, what's left over after that digital engagement and the interactions that arrive at the agent nowadays, they tend to be the more complex ones, right? So, therefore, I think that you need to use technology as well as training to empower the agent to focus less on what to say to the customer and more on how to say it, right? So it's more about creating empathy with customers that drive loyalty, right? It's emotion. There's this saying that people will forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So it goes back to this core competency of driving empathy. So think about the skill set and the training involved and more in how do you create empathy, which starts with listening, right? Kind of listening to customers, understand their problems and before you take action. And then technology helps. And I don't want to jump ahead, but of course, one of the key areas that we use with AI is what we call, agent assist. So agent assist is basically AI machine learning applied to the agent desktop. So that, such as the metaphor would be here, you're driving your car, right? And you have your navigation app that gives you direction, where to turn, and you have minimum amount of attention to that. But then it will surface knowledge and it will surface suggestions and provide next best actions to help the agent navigate through that conversation in the best possible way, right? So they can focus more on the customer and less on what they're trying to say. So yeah, very exciting area.
I love that concept. And I haven't heard that analogy of the GPS before, but you're absolutely right. Before I'd pull up MapQuest and spend 2 or 3 hours planning my trip out. Now I hop in the car without thinking. And that's my onboarding time, essentially, that you've shrunk down to almost nothing with an approach like that. Interested in wondering how are I guess, people in the industry managing their knowledge? So in terms of, I guess, agent assist might be one way to get it out there. I know we've dabbled in a couple of different knowledge management platforms that will start to do live listening and try to pull up relevant information. But just wondering if there's any other creative solutions or what you've seen in the industry in terms of getting the right information to the people or helping them get through onboarding faster.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think one thing, there are obviously different types of knowledge management technologies and different things that you can use and leverage to serve up knowledge. But I think the other part that sometimes is missed is understanding the workflow of the rep, and understanding that there are different constituents, for lack of a better term, across organizations that own different pieces of knowledge, and they're all in different hubs or areas of things they're comfortable with using or that they've used historically. And so it's understanding, like, one, are you going to change that structure into maybe now a more central knowledge management system? Or two, do you work within that structure because it works for those areas? And then how do you crowdsource that information to be able to serve up that information to your front lines in a very easy and frictionless way? And so, you know, kind of segueing into some parts of technology, like things like Lessonly knowledge, for example, where irrespective of what you choose to use, so if it's a Google Doc, or if it's Jira, or if it's Confluence or a wiki, you know, or in Lessonly or other tools, we're not going to necessarily dictate where that information is, because it just happens to be there for whatever the business reason is. And so being able to work with the workflow of the reps to say, you know, searching through things like our Google Chrome extension, using natural language to say, how can I reset customer password? And then it looking across those platforms to say, okay, this is what I'm finding. And then you being able to then serve up that information directly versus having it to build it in your specific system without, you know, having access to it across the other parts of your organization that may already have that information. So I would say aligning to their workflow, that's one example. Another commonly used technology is, we know, are things like Teams and Slack. And so, you know, oftentimes questions are asked in those types of forums. And so being able to serve up information in the way that reps are asking those questions in those channels, and then being able to then continue to train and I guess ensure that that AI technology in the background is getting smarter by you validating that, yes, this is the right information that I was looking for.
Absolutely. And kind of what I'm hearing on the themes of this is that we know headcount can be expensive, so we need to use them for the best things possible, which is things like empathy and really adding value to the call. So focusing our training there is going to be incredibly important. And then on the flip side of that, we're looking for really the technology or the ways that we can speed up onboarding and also serve up information in the moment that's contextual and will help add value to any particular interaction. And I think, Stephanie, as you were alluding to as well, the systems that you have to support that need to be flexible, integrate across multiple different systems, because in the moment, you don't have time to be worrying about those things. It's getting it out as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. This has been awesome. And I think I want to start to change gears a little bit because we've talked a lot about, I think, knowledge. So in terms of knowledge management, there's a lot of information there. We've alluded to a lot of information in terms of how we track our agents in AHT and just the amount of stats in a contact center. So I'm thinking of digital. What always comes hand in hand in digital is data. So I'd love to know your perspective on, as we're sort of looking today and into the future, has the new surge in data or data availability changed the landscape for contact centers? Wonder what you guys think. How about Grafton? We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, because I mean, not only is it whether new machine learning, but the ability to access that data and it crossing whether you're using external engines or your own internal engines to be able to access that data, and the ability now to mine the data. That's the biggest thing. The data is all theoretically has been there to a degree, but the ability to mine it and then use it in a way that applies to the business is so important. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really where you're going to see, and it blends exactly with what Stephanie was saying too, the ability and the knowledge of having that data accessible to the agent, and the business organization's job, especially within IT, is making it accessible. So I think that's really going to be the key, is the data is there, the digital age is there, but making it in a, we'll call it tangible or readable form for the agent to work with is going to be the most critical element.
Certainly.
If I may add, I think Grafton got me excited because kind of the mining the data is the challenge, right? And the opportunity. I think big data and AI have enabled us to harvest, insights from data right now. So there's this other saying that goes like, understanding the problem is 50% of the solution. So I think if you can mine the data and then identify opportunities to improve, you're already 50% along that way, right, of solving it. And one challenge, I want to take this from a different angle now, because harvesting the data is really important. Of course, AI plays a key role, right, and how we learn from kind of the experience, the interactions, but also the ability to improve the data and the knowledge, right, back to the knowledge management. So one idea that I'm really excited about, right, so this is it's pretty new, but I think it's novel in its conception, is think about today, everything is AI. Everything that can be automated is being automated. With that said, if you think about AI machine learning, the model is only as good as the data you feed into it, right? So if you feed bad data into it, then you get bad results. So the idea of inserting the human in the loop. So this is pretty exciting, because if you think about how companies are approaching AI and machine learning, big data, it's very expensive. They hire data scientists, right? It takes a lot to train the machine learning models and to fine tune them. And it's a constant effort. So there's literally companies hiring teams of data scientists to do this. And the results, they're not always the best, because these people are not in the front line. So it's hard for them to react and to fine tune accurately. So the idea of using agents, right? The person that's in the front line, in front of customers, talking to customers, to provide feedback and improve that data, I think it's exciting, right? So in other words, so it's providing visibility to the agents and supervisors, right? People that are dealing with customers, to see what data is coming into the conversation, what's in the output of the machine learning system, and then being able to provide feedback and improve the system in real time. So I think not only makes for better models and more accurate, but also allows companies to react faster, because things are changing so fast, right? By the time the team's been able to train AI on a new issue, let's say a new variant of COVID, it may have taken weeks. Whereas if you use the person that's in the field and they learn that there's a new trend, they can immediately start training the model to respond in real time. So very, very exciting area.
It's funny, the thing coming to my mind is data is a weapon, and it's how you use it. And I'm also hearing that it's the practitioners of the folks that are overseeing the data are key in terms of having context and understanding the business in order to add relevancy, which I've found personally in our experience as well. So great insights. And I guess thinking of data in terms of one of our biggest collectors of data, I couldn't talk about the contact center and the future of contact centers if we didn't touch on our beloved IVRs. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about in terms of how the IVR is evolving, and what are some of the innovative ways or changes that are coming? Maybe start with Shai.
Okay, well, I'll expand to just address self-serve in general, because I see IVR as just part of that. And I think self-serve has gotten really, really good over the recent years. And that's partly because the technology has improved a lot. And it's also partly because, consumer behavior has adapted and changed, so that, younger consumers, if they can do something through self-serve, that is their preference. And so you've really got both of these forces pushing in the same direction. We've got, improving technology to power self-serve, and we've got willing consumers who will try to self-serve before trying to reach an agent. And it's interesting because that was not the case. You guys might remember, maybe 10 years ago, you could call into a call center and they would do all kinds of things to discourage you. They'd say, oh, visit our website first. If you tried our website, they spell out the URL. Actually, an airline I use at one point was charging extra if you use the agent to book your flight versus doing the online approach. But as it turns out, that was kind of a passing, I don't want to call it a fad, but that phase was short-lived. And we've now crossed over to the point where you don't need to discourage people from calling and push them towards self-serve. People will go there and really only go to the agents if they can't get what they, now this is not universally true. There's still, the older cohort that prefer to talk to people. But that is, a problem that time will solve for us and in a natural course of things. And so, I really see that we've sort of crossed a chasm when it comes to self-serve. And then just to connect this back to our earlier topic about agents and labor shortage, all of this goes hand in hand, because what you want, if you want to retain your agents, is to remove the work from them that is boring and repetitive and draining, right? So the more of the easy stuff you can take off their plate, the more of the boring stuff, the better in terms of keeping your agents engaged and retained. So all of this really plays into the labor shortage question, and it really connects in a nice way.
Absolutely. And I kind of think of the IVR as the early stages of where we see bots going, and sort of taking us into the ushering into the new age. I'd love to hear any perspectives, I guess maybe Fernando, in terms of any evolutions that AI is injecting into the IVR, and even Grafton too, if you had any security perspectives on the way we authenticate there, or if there's anything evolving. Not sure, but just throwing it out there.
Yeah, so I'll share a few thoughts. So, IVRs historically, right? Chai is right. I mean, there's been a lot of improvement historically, however, and the perception that exists, and even kind of proven in data. Poor self-service is the number one source of customer dissatisfaction, right? So from the consumer standpoint, the metaphor again is like you're inviting a friend over to have dinner at your house, right? And when they show up, you open the door and your answer is, "Who are you? What do you want?" We do the same with customers. We invite them to do business with us. When they show up, we ask them, "Who are you and what do you want?" So it's that terrible experience. That's why it's a source of dissatisfaction. Now, technology is changing this. So IVRs, self-service in general, and it was mentioned by many on the panel, tends to be the first step in a company's digital transformation, right? Because customers want to self-serve. So technology like conversational AI, which is a combination of natural language understanding and machine learning, are truly transforming how we think about that piece of the kind of the customer interaction, right? Kind of the front end of the house. It's using technology quite interesting, an ability to listen, to transcribe, and to look for things like intent, right? First, to know who you are, so you don't have to repeat yourself, or at least make an attempt what the next best action might be. So the example of the airline was brought up, right? And so in the IVR days, but now we can do a lot better, is make an attempt to, are you calling about rescheduling your flight, right? Assuming that you missed your connection as an example. So you make an attempt, you're saving people's time, you understand who they are. But most importantly, I think natural language understanding allows us to interact with customers in a way that's human, in a way that's natural to them. So not only look at things like intent, but it understands language, it understands tone of voice, understands sentiment, right? Certain words, and knows when, if it's a major issue, as an example, knows when there's a limit to AI, and then the call needs to be transferred to a human agent to complete that transaction. So it's truly reducing friction and transforming the way we interact with customers in a way that's natural, in a way that's human to them, which is very, very exciting.
And it bridges right to your point earlier about empathy and the need to focus on sort of, I guess, even the cues of where we might need to be injecting it, right? But you touched on something that I'm really interested to hear Grafton's perspective. So you said, when we know who we are, then it's easy to. How hard is it to know who we are, I guess, in today's age? And do you see any new challenges coming in the way we authenticate, or I guess even just security in general in our self-serve?
Yeah, look, I mean, we talked about foundation building, right? So if you don't have good security behind it, what good is the interaction if you're dealing with a fraudulent interaction? So yeah, we deal with that every day. It's the space we live in. I mean, I think you go back to kind of the previous topic around where that data sits, how you access it. So to your point, Fernando, whether it's voice biometrics or machine learning, natural language learning, previous caller ID, I mean, those things that we've relied on for years, it's having that information consistent and authentic and exactly naming, right, who that person is. Now, we all know people change phone numbers. People call from different phone numbers. People might have background noise. So I'm just picking a couple of examples that can point hole or poke holes into some bit of that technology. So there is, even though, I mean, the point of, yeah, I love your analogy, Fernando, of the people coming to the front door and go, who are you? It's a great one, but sometimes, you know, there is some element where you do have to validate. And the real key for contact center is how quickly you can do that and how authentically you can do that, right? Whether that's leaving their voice the last time they called so they can authenticate their voice. There's companies that provide that. Or other, you know, more standard metrics. But, you know, the days of date of birth, last four of social, you know, those are risky gathering metrics to have in an organization. We still hear them today because they haven't quite caught up to what technology can bring them with other more specific to the human elements that you were talking about, Fernando. So I think the bottom line is it's the foundation before anything else is having good authentic security to understand who that person is. And then one other point too, there's also the organization's ability to assess the risk of it maybe not being that person. So what value does being wrong 0.0001% of the time, what negative value does that bring? What positive value? And you have to evaluate what's the risk, right? What's the actuarial point of maybe it's wrong, and what does that mean from a fraud perspective, right? So if it's bank account, yeah, I wouldn't want to be wrong. Maybe if shopping for some clothes, maybe it's okay. So I think that's where the business just has to make that evaluation as far as what that risk assessment could be.
Totally. Contextual authentication, essentially, right? It's funny, you guys reminded me of two scary times in my past where we were definitely asking for mother's maiden name, and that would get you full access to your finances, and that's scary. And I also remember times where we charged 50 cents to know your balance, which is just feels very archaic looking back at that now. Wow. So as I know we're getting closer towards the end of the amount of time we have here, so I wanted to sort of, I guess, think in a broad scale, when you sort of project out in the next 5 years, and this could be within your space or just sort of contact centers in general, what do you think is going to be one of the biggest single technology impacts that we're going to be grappling with and working through? And I'd like to understand why. So as you kind of think about that, we can kind of just go around. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to start, but what's the big one, the big kahuna that's, I don't know, either going to make it better or things that we need to start considering? Is it AI, Fernando?
Yeah, so I didn't want to jump in kind of first.
Oh, please.
I'm a little biased here, but I do believe like AI is really the thing that's going to change everything. It's already changing everything. I think prior to COVID, companies were testing the water. And all of a sudden, we went from pilots to production in basically a matter of months, right? So this is real. The use cases are being implemented and the results are being delivered. And it's exciting. And I think that this is only going to increase. And if you take a look at what's going to happen, because the question is kind of the next in the future, how that evolves. The surge in real-time customer interaction volumes, a lot of this was driven by COVID and digital, right? It's only going to continue. So the projection is that the volume of interactions will grow exponentially by a factor of 3 to 5x in the next few years. So from the company's standpoint, they just can't keep adding more people to solve the problem because that isn't sustainable. It's too expensive. And then the question is, how do you find a way to do more with less and while you can create empathy and personalization but with such high amount of call volumes? And the only way to do that is AI, right? The only way to do this is through AI, is the ability to mine data, the ability to understand context, to understand who you are personally and sentiment analysis and be able to deliver more personalized experience at scale. Right, and dealing with big data. So I really think, and there's use cases that that come to mind here and how this is happening now, but it will evolve. But in my mind, by no means this is, and it's been called, if you look at the literature and look at the news, right? A lot of people are kind of talking about the fourth revolution in AI, and I'm not sure if it will be the fourth revolution, but it's going to be big.
I've heard similar, and I think I couldn't disagree at all with the notion that AI is going to change the world. I think the problem that a lot of people face is, how do I use it? And just the topic of AI is so broad that it becomes a sort of a stopgap for everything. And it's more about, how do we apply it in value add scenarios and in the right scenarios? But also, to your point, Fernando, sort of lasso ourselves to it, because it's going to explode and continue to evolve very quickly. Wondering your guys' thoughts, Shai, Graft, and Stephanie, in terms of whether you think it's AI and how we manage it, or if there's other elements that maybe came to mind as I raised the question.
We're going back to the question of major trends to watch in the industry, or major aspects that are going to change. I think we're going to get a lot more sophisticated in how we connect callers with agents, and doing it in a smarter way. And this builds on some of the points we've talked about. Number one, the labor shortage, which makes agents more expensive. Number two, the fact that self-serve has taken a lot of the easy stuff off the plate. So what this means is that, you know, the agent conversations are more valuable in and of themselves. And we're learning that these conversations really are the make or break moments in terms of, you know, the customer sentiment and how they view your brand. And so we have to get a lot smarter about connecting caller with agent. One obvious thing is replacing hold time with a callback. It's, you know, that's sort of table stakes. But another thing is connecting back to the point I made right back at the beginning, when you have excess demand, what you do when you suddenly have more calls than you can handle. And for a lot of call centers, there's really no plan on the books for what they're going to do if there are more calls than they can handle in a given day, and that, you know, continues for day after day. So I think we're going to get a lot smarter about scheduling those calls, about making sure those connections happen smoothly, reducing the friction, and just viewing every one of those interactions as something that's got to be really high quality, and just a smooth on-ramp to the conversation, a conversation that handles the issue, and an agent that's got all the right knowledge, you know, through agent assist technologies or whatever, just packaged all together in a way that is a great experience, both for the caller and the agent, right? I mean, we've got to keep agents happy because now we've got a labor shortage, and obviously we have to keep callers happy because they're the customer. So I think that's really where a lot of the focus is going to be over the next few years.
I buy a lot into that. So I'm hearing you feeling like things are going to become a little bit more tighter in terms of the way we operate the business, which I agree as we get better. But leading with the notion that self-serve is a preference. If you're coming to an agent, that's our last line of defense, which means we better be there to recover the service and do the best we possibly can. And I think that's a beautiful point, Shai. Stephanie, Grafton, how are you feeling when you start to project out? I'm sure, Stephanie, from a Lessonly perspective, you might even say, like, you know what? We've talked a lot about labor. We need to be focusing on this because it's going to be a really big issue, or the way that we bring people onto our organizations. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, the question was around a specific piece of technology, or, you know, what the next kind of focus is from a technology trend. But I think overall, as these different pieces of technologies, methodologies, and approaches are hitting front lines and impacting businesses and how they do operate, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a piece of technology per se, but I think it's about the approach and how you're training everyone on all these aspects, whether it be new tools you're using, new methodologies of how you're talking to a customer, or how you're solving that customer's problem, to maybe a new product. And so it's not a piece of technology. I think it's more about, for me, from my perspective, just the approach of how you are now tackling training and enabling your reps to do that. And that goes back to evolving how that's currently done today, because the way that it's currently done today is not sustainable. And generally speaking, I think we've kind of debated about this and talked about this before. As much as training is considered important, at least, you know, from what I hear and what people say, it's the last thing that people invest in. It's the last thing that people invest in terms of time and technology, and just also rethinking how they're doing it, because, you know, and not to take anything away from anyone, it's just, we've done it the way we've done it for so long, you know, in classrooms, physically beside each other, et cetera. And until recently, no one was forced to do it any differently. And so now it's like thinking about how do we change that approach to then support all these different things that are really going to change the landscape of call centers. So I think that's kind of what I'm taking away from this.
Certainly. I think we could spend an entire session on just training in itself, because the impacts I know we felt at CI in terms of work from home and this disjointed nature of people being in different places. There's a lot to unpack there. And I picked up elements on it's really teaching people how to fish is sort of the future way that we're going to be going forward, right? Thank you, Stephanie. Last but not least, just to round us out, Grafton, how are you feeling?
Yeah, to me, this may be unpopular or maybe popular depending what side of the fence you're on, but I think budget is going to be a real consideration, because we're asking, if you've listened to this whole conversation, we're asking CFOs, CIOs to spend money, right? Because there has to be a change in a lot of change in what they're doing today, if they're using maybe a relatively antiquated solution. So I think when we're looking at the future, I think that it's going to be important for the CISO audience here, or sorry, CIO, CISO, C-suite audience, to really be in contact with the CFO and the budget side of the house, because these things do cost money, and it's not necessarily just a spend, but really understanding what that return on investment is. Because whether that's a savings on the human side, Stephanie's point, right? How do we automate some of these things? Excuse me. And so I think that's going to be the real key. Obviously, technology is going to be the foundation of it, but organizations being willing to put that money into investing back in, to often a contact center is sometimes seen as an expense rather than a return on that investment. So I think that's going to be really key, that just send that message, you know, or share that message, I guess, with some of our buying audience.
Certainly. I think that's a good grounding message to leave us on, Grafton, and almost brings us full circle back to how we talked with Fernando on picking the right places to put our investments, because at the end of the day, it's easy to sort of spray it across. Guys, this has been awesome. The unique perspectives you each bring, I think, added so much color to this discussion, and I picked up a ton. You know, I think some of the themes I picked up through the conversation were that the paradigm shift is real, and as a result, we need to start rethinking sort of all aspects of our business. The equation isn't 1 + 1 = 2 anymore. It's completely different. So align your business to that. I think we need to empower our reps was a big theme that I picked up out of this, in terms of focusing on our agents and really setting them up for success, because the job's gotten harder, the job's gotten more complex. And I loved the analogy, Fernando, you used, that an agent essentially used to do the same thing 1,000,000 times, and today they do 1,000,000 things at the same time, which really speaks to the challenge that these folks are dealing with. I also heard that data practitioners and having context on our data is key in terms of the way that we're going to drive value in that space. And really, the goal of technology from an overarching perspective is to resist friction. So look for places like, whether it's injecting AI into your IVR, voice biometrics, callbacks, those types of things are going to help automatically reduce friction and ultimately make the job of the agents easier to drive great conversations and value. And the last key insight I picked up, which I thought was fundamental, is Fernando is an analogy machine. So I'm going to be coming to him for anything in terms of analogies going forward, because it was just amazing. But just to close and wrap up, a huge thank you to each and every one of you. I can't thank you enough for your time and just being willing to share your open insights like this. Big thank you to GTACC and our sponsors for this year's conference. And just thank you to all of our participants for joining in for our GTACC 2021. The future is now Tech Talks. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you.
Bye.